One night, in the middle of nowhere, I had a freaky situation happen to me. I was visiting my grandma, who lived out in the middle of nowhere. She had a house on the lake, and to get there required driving down a long dirt road for many miles. It wasn't a very popular lake, so she didn't have any neighbors, the closest houses being at least a mile or two away. Because it was such a long drive, whenever I visited, I would just naturally stay the night in her guest bedroom so that I wouldn't have to drive long, tiring hours in the darkness. One night when I was visiting my grandma, I was sitting out on her back patio just hanging out listening to music. It was close to midnight, and my grandma had gone to bed already, so I was just enjoying the nice night air while sitting outside on my phone. Over the sound of my music, I thought I heard something banging or clanking around. There was a steady breeze that night, so I just expected it to be the wind moving something and making noise down by the boathouse. However, as the night continued, I also saw some quick flashes of light from down by the dock and the boathouse, and I knew that somebody had to be messing around down there. I was nervous because I was out in the middle of nowhere and isolated enough that there shouldn't be anybody nearby, let alone looking around down by my grandma's boathouse. I thought about calling the cops, but decided against it because it would take over an hour for them to arrive most likely. Instead, I turned off the music and went inside to grab my grandma's revolver, which I knew she kept loaded. Upon coming back outside the patio, I saw occasional movements of light down by the boathouse, so I decided to confront whoever it was now that I had a weapon. I called out to stop messing around by the dock and to reveal themselves and leave the property. I assumed that whoever it was would simply just leave without revealing who they were, but to my surprise, the figure of a tall, skinny man stepped out onto the dock. Illuminated by the moonlight, all I could see was his figure at first, but as he approached, I saw that it was an older gentleman. He casually began walking up the dock and towards where I was standing on the back patio, as if he had been doing nothing wrong. He didn't say anything as he slowly kept approaching, so I yelled out to stop and leave the property or else I'd shoot. I thought for sure that would be enough warning for him, but he just kept coming up the lawn towards me. I finally took a warning shot right above his head to stop him from advancing. After I had fired the shot, he put up his hands and spoke to me for the first time, saying to take it easy and relax. Fully creeped out by the demeanor of this old skinny man, I told him to leave immediately or I would shoot him. The man stood still for a couple seconds, and I thought that he might start walking towards me again and I'd have to shoot him. However, he turned back and walked out into the woods, back down to the left of the dock, and disappeared. I was worried the rest of the night and didn't get much sleep, half expecting him to come back, but he never did. I'm not sure what his deal was and why he was so comfortable and nonchalant about approaching me while at gunpoint. The following morning, I warned my grandma about it, just in case he ever came around again. This happened to me 2 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I live in the countryside of Ireland, far from the nearest town, out in the middle of nowhere. It's usually pretty quiet, which is nice. Most nights, the only sounds I hear are the occasional cow escaping the field next door or my dog barking at someone walking by. But about 2 years ago, I heard something really strange. It was late spring, and the night sky was clear. I remember stepping into the kitchen around midnight for a snack. As I rummaged through the cupboards, I began to hear noises outside. At first, I thought it was just an animal, but the sounds only grew louder. I opened up the window to listen better, and I saw my dog standing by the back door. She wasn't barking, which was strange because she usually barks at anything, especially animals. Instead, she was focused on the forest behind our house. The noise was hard to describe, but it was like metal being scraped, but it had a croaky quality to it. I didn't like it, and the fact that my dog was scared made me uneasy, because she was a big dog and not easily frightened. I couldn't understand what could be out there, so I decided to bring her inside and go to bed. But as I lay in my room, the sound seemed to follow me. It shifted to the front of the house, which didn't make sense. I shut my curtains, hoping to block out whatever was outside. Just as I got comfortable, I heard a tap on my window. It was soft at first, but then it became a steady tapping noise. It sounded like stones being thrown against the glass. I stayed under the covers just listening and hoping that it would stop. It went on for what felt like an eternity, but eventually I fell asleep. The next morning, I mentioned the night to my neighbors. That's when I found out a man had moved into a house just around the corner. They said he wasn't exactly a law-abiding citizen, and he had a history of trouble with the law, so much so that whispers about him being a drug dealer floated around. About a month later, a massive stash of drugs was discovered in a shed nearby, and we never saw that man again after that. Thinking back, I can't shake the feeling that he might have been trying to scare me that night while he was high or something, but it was just all so strange. Like, how did he create that sound for hours? And how did the sound move around the outside of my house so quickly? What unsettled me the most was the thought of what could have happened if I had gone to check on the noise. I'm still not 100% sure of what it was, but it freaked me out. A few years ago, I visited some friends out in Oregon who lived on a secluded 300-acre property in the middle of nowhere. We were deep in the woods, surrounded by nothing but trees and the sounds of nature. On the second evening, we were sitting around a fire pit enjoying each other's company as the sun was setting, making the whole sky orange. There was a total of 6 of us there, and 2 of my friends had brought their kids who were busy making s'mores. The others were having casual conversation, and I was comfortable in my folding chair, leaning back and zoning out, just staring into the darkness. After a while, I noticed something strange. I kept staring at this one particular tree, trying to figure out what I was seeing. After I kept looking at it, I deciphered what looked like a giant hand wrapped around the trunk of the tree. I quickly turned to my friend Anthony, who was sitting closest to me, telling him to take a look at the tree. I motioned with my hand, telling him the direction to look. He also couldn't determine what he was seeing at first, but I told him to just keep looking and focus on it. Finally, he saw what I was seeing and whispered to me, "Is that a hand?" It blended in so well with the bark of the tree, but the more we looked at it, the more certain we were it was a massive hand gripping the tree. The fingers were thick, almost like tree bark. They had ridges and cracks, giving them a rough appearance. It was bizarre, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. I felt goosebumps cover my arms as we both stared at the hand. It was about 15 meters away, and it didn't move at all. We exchanged nervous glances, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The kids were laughing and joking around the fire, and we didn't want to alert anyone else in fear of scaring the kids. After 8 long minutes, the grip of the hand suddenly loosened and disappeared behind the tree into the darkness of the forest. The movement of the hand disappearing confirmed to both Anthony and I that it wasn't an illusion. Anthony and I looked at each other wide-eyed and speechless, feeling that we had seen something that didn't belong in our world. Later that night, we finally got up from our chairs, and we wanted to check out the area where we had seen the hand. We walked towards the tree. When we reached it, we both paused, taking in its massive trunk. It was at least 2 feet in circumference, and it was hard to imagine how something with a hand could be that big. I inspected the ground around the base of the tree, looking for any signs of footprints, scratches, or anything that could explain what we had seen. But there was nothing. No imprints in the dirt, and no smell like you would expect from a wild animal. I've heard tons of stories of man-like creatures residing in the deep woods, and I'm a believer now. Whatever that thing was bigger than any regular human, and based off the size of the tree that its hand was wrapped around, it had to have been huge. This is a true story of something that happened to me and a few friends a couple of decades ago when I was still a teenager. My family had just moved from a big city to a quiet area in England, basically in the middle of nowhere. My new house was half a mile from an old ruin of a castle called Barry Pomeroy. The locals always said that the castle was haunted, but tours of the castle were regularly given during the daytime, so I didn't really believe it. One night, a few of my friends and I thought it would be fun to explore the castle at night. It was around 9 p.m. when we went to check it out. There was still plenty of light to see, but the summer sky was darkening. We walked up the valley, taking the steep footpath to the castle's gatehouse. We knew that we could sneak in pretty easily by climbing over a ruined wall, and at this point, they didn't employ guards yet to keep people from sneaking in at night. Once inside, we moved through the old dining room and climbed the ramparts to take in the views. It was dark by now, and the moonlight cast long shadows everywhere, making it a bit creepy. We were having fun though, and eventually decided to check out the dungeon. As we descended the stone staircase, we noticed tiny candles flickering on the steps. Tours for the day had been finished for many hours now, and the candles were freshly lit. At the bottom, we found what looked like a shrine. There were candles arranged in a circle, and something was drawn on the wall behind it. I don't remember the details of the drawing, but it felt eerie. The candles and the thought of someone else being in the dungeon area made us uneasy, so we quickly went back up the staircase. When we reached the top of the staircase, I realized my friend Alan was missing. I called out his name, and after looking around, we saw a figure walking around on the ramparts. He must have chickened out and never came down to the dungeons, even though we thought he was with us. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. Alan was coming up the stairs after lagging a bit behind, and was asking why I was shouting his name. Sure enough, I turned to see Alan standing behind me now. My heart dropped as we looked back up towards the ramparts. The shadowy figure I had seen that I thought was Alan was still up on the ramparts, watching us. It didn't move for a moment, then slowly slipped behind a pillar and vanished. We were all on edge now and decided it was best to leave. We hurried back the way we had gotten in, climbed over the wall and headed towards the footpath through the woods. As we walked, I glanced back at the castle. It loomed in the darkness, and I noticed the figure again. This time, it was perched on top of the wall, moving along it as if it was following us. As quickly as we could, we hurried down the path, trying to keep our footing in the uneven ground. When we reached the bottom of the valley, I looked back again. The castle seemed even more imposing now. This time, when I looked back, I saw a faint blue light glowing on the wall. It drifted slowly, then disappeared over the edge of the castle. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. That was the first and last time I ever experienced something I couldn't explain. I thought maybe it was just some guy trying to scare us off, but I couldn't shake the image of that blue light fading away. It looked so supernatural, and I began believing that the castle indeed was haunted. When I was about 13, my family lived in a remote area in the middle of nowhere, Canada. One winter night, I decided to unwind in the hot tub on our deck. It was around 2 or 3 a.m., and the world was quiet, blanketed in knee-deep snow from a recent snowfall. As I sat there watching the trees and listening to the night sounds, something caught my eye. Emerging from the darkness of the woods was a massive wolf. It was unlike any wolf I had ever seen. Its silver coat shimmered in the moonlight, and its green eyes pierced through the night. The wolf walked along the fence that bordered the property. For a moment, it paused and locked eyes with me. I was up on the deck, and the wolf was far away below, but I was still terrified, and I sat as still as possible, waiting to see what would happen. The wolf continued on its path towards the barn where our horses were kept. As it approached the barn, there was a light on the outside on the other side that illuminated the inside just a bit. The barn was dark inside, but I could clearly see the outline of the wolf moving through the barn. Halfway through the barn, the shape of the wolf totally shifted. It was like it morphed into something more human-like, although it was big with broad shoulders and seemed to stand at least 7 feet tall. The horses weren't skittish at all and were completely silent, which was strange. The tall figure rounded the corner, but did not appear on the other side of the barn. I strained to see if it would reemerge from behind the barn at some point, but it never did. It must have just vanished into the darkness on the other side of the barn. I had no idea if there was a trick going on with the light and shadows inside the barn, but I had no idea what I had just seen, and I had never seen a wolf that big. Later, I found that my brother had experienced something similar. He told me that he woke up one night feeling a strange sensation, like he was being watched. When he looked out of his window, he saw the same large wolf walking away from his window. I have yet to see the wolf again, and I wonder if I ever want to.